The polished marble floors of Sterling Manor, cold and unforgiving underfoot, were a constant reminder of my place in that opulent cage. My name is Kevin Vance, and at 32, I had always felt like an anomaly, an unwelcome echo in a house that vibrated with the presence of others. Despite being Arthur Sterling's only biological son, I existed on the fringes of his meticulously curated life. Arthur, my father, was a titan of American real estate, his name synonymous with gleaming skyscrapers and sprawling residential communities across the East Coast. Sterling Holdings, his empire, was a testament to his ambition, his undeniable cunning, and what the world believed was his singular, self-made genius. But I was about to expose the truth. That empire, those foundations, were built on a stolen legacy, and the true architect was a woman erased from history. My mother, Eleanor Vance. My earliest memories of Sterling Manor are a kaleidoscope of warmth and laughter, all tied to Eleanor. She was a force of nature, a brilliant, multilingual woman with an uncanny eye for patterns and an even greater gift for connection. While Arthur, a charismatic whirlwind, was out schmoozing investors and making grand, sweeping pronouncements about his vision, it was Eleanor who quietly, meticulously laid the true groundwork. She possessed an almost prophetic ability to identify undervalued tracts of land, seeing the potential for vibrant communities where others saw only swamp or scrubland. She navigated the labyrinthine world of zoning laws and environmental regulations with a lawyer's precision, often charming local officials with her genuine passion for sustainable development. She spoke 5 languages fluently, effortlessly, bridging cultural divides with immigrant landowners and a diverse construction workforce. I remember her at her large oak desk in the study, surrounded by maps and legal texts, her mind constantly whirring, her laughter a bright, melodic counterpoint to Arthur's often brusque demeanor. He'd often call her his secret weapon, a term I now understood to be both a backhanded compliment and a calculated dismissal, a way to acknowledge her brilliance without ever truly sharing the spotlight or the credit. She wasn't just his wife, she was his strategic partner, his silent co-founder, the true intellectual engine behind Sterling Holdings' meteoric rise. Then, when I was 8, a cruel twist of fate ripped her from my life. A drunk driver, a blur of reckless speed, extinguished her vibrant light in an instant, leaving a void in my world that echoed with a chilling, deafening silence. Arthur, a man who built his life on control and unwavering self-possession, seemed to unravel. He retreated into himself, a hollowed-out shell, consumed by a grief that left no room for comfort or connection with his grieving son. Sterling Manor, once a lively home, transformed into a cold, silent mausoleum, its grand halls echoing with unspoken pain. Barely a year later, the serpent slithered into our fragile nest. Cassandra arrived. She was a former paralegal, 2 decades Arthur's junior, with a veneer of polished sophistication that barely concealed a ruthless ambition. Her eyes held the cold, calculating glint of a freshly cut diamond, sharp and glittering. She didn't arrive alone. With her came her 2 children from a previous marriage. Serafina, 2 years my senior, already mirroring her mother's razor-sharp edges and an inherent sense of entitlement, and Brandon, a year younger than me, whose only discernible talent seemed to be spending money with reckless abandon and cultivating an air of detached, sneering superiority. From the moment Cassandra stepped across the threshold of Sterling Manor, she began her systematic eradication of Eleanor. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. My mother's cherished collection of botanical prints, each one a gift from Arthur, vanished from the sunlit drawing room walls, replaced by abstract, impersonal art. Her beloved rose garden, a riot of vibrant color and fragrance that Eleanor had personally nurtured, was brutally torn up and replaced with a sterile, geometrically precise landscape of manicured shrubs and stark stone pathways. Even the cherished family recipes, scribbled in Eleanor's elegant handwriting, filled with notes about my favorite meals, disappeared from the kitchen, replaced by cookbooks filled with bland, conventional dishes. When I, a bewildered and heartbroken child, protested these acts of erasure, Arthur, already under Cassandra's subtle, insidious influence, would dismiss me with a curt wave of his hand. Cassandra is making this house her own, Kevin. You need to accept that. Your mother wouldn't want you dwelling on the past. His words were a constant, nagging betrayal, each one chipping away at the fragile memory of the woman I adored, the woman who was the true heart and soul of our home. It was as if Eleanor had never existed, replaced by a meticulously constructed illusion designed to suit Cassandra's narrative. My teenage years at Sterling Manor were a masterclass in feeling utterly invisible. Serafina and Brandon, with Cassandra's silent but ever-present encouragement, treated me like a persistent shadow, a less than equal family member. They reveled in the spotlight of Arthur's attention, their accomplishments, no matter how minor, magnified, and celebrated. Serafina, with her sharp wit and manipulative charm, positioned herself as the intellectual heir, groomed for a career in corporate law, destined to take over Sterling Holdings' legal department. Brandon, a handsome but utterly vacuous socialite, was the designated future face of Sterling Holdings. Despite possessing the business acumen of a potted plant and a chronic inability to finish anything he started, I watched, a silent observer, as Arthur lavished them with extravagant gifts, luxury cars, designer clothes, trust funds that seemed to materialize out of thin air. He paid for Serafina's Ivy League law degree without a second thought, and financed Brandon's string of disastrous startup ventures with limitless generosity, each one collapsing spectacularly and expensively. I felt the familiar, bitter sting of being an outsider, a charity case in my own home, constantly reminded that I didn't truly belong to their polished, privileged world. My own achievements, my academic distinctions, my quiet but fierce ambition were consistently overlooked, dismissed as quaint hobbies or irrelevant pursuits. The real, gut-wrenching blow came during my senior year of high school. Driven by an unwavering desire to honor Eleanor's memory and forge my own path, to build something real and lasting, I had poured countless hours into my studies. My efforts paid off. I was accepted into MIT's prestigious architecture program with a significant partial scholarship. It wasn't a full ride, but it was enough to make my dreams tangible. I approached Arthur, trembling with a mix of excitement and trepidation, asking for help with the remaining tuition. His response was a cold, brutal splash of water to the face, a memory that would forever be etched in my mind. "Kevin," he said, his voice laced with the dismissive tone he usually reserved for incompetent contractors or nagging subordinates. "You need to learn the value of money. Your mother left you a trust fund. Use that for college nonsense." He waved his hand, his gaze already drifting back to the financial newspaper clutched in his hand, dismissing me as he did all inconvenient truths. "You're a man now, figure it out." The words themselves were a sting, but the true agony began when I tried to access that trust fund. It was frozen. Not just temporarily frozen, but entangled in a dizzying labyrinth of legal complexities. Claimed Marcus Thorne, Cassandra's brother and the family's newly installed, suspiciously young and overly zealous financial advisor. Marcus, with his slick back hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes, claimed there were complications with the paperwork, hinting at obscure legalities that would take years, perhaps even a lifetime, to unravel. He even suggested, with a feigned air of concern, that perhaps Eleanor hadn't managed her finances as well as Arthur had. It was a lie, of course, a calculated, insidious maneuver orchestrated by Cassandra and Marcus to deny me access to what was rightfully mine, to ensure I remained dependent and therefore controllable. I was left with no choice. While Serafina was graduating from law school with honors and Brandon was cruising through Europe on Arthur's boundless dime, leaving a trail of unpaid debts and broken promises, I enrolled in a local community college. Every spare moment was spent working grueling night shifts at a sprawling construction site on the outskirts of Boston. My hands calloused, my body aching, but my resolve hardening with every swing of a hammer. I took classes during the day, snatching sleep in stolen hours. It was on those dusty, flood-lit construction sites, amidst the roar of machinery and the scent of curing concrete, that I found an unexpected, invaluable education. My foreman, a gruff but kind-hearted veteran named Rico Vasquez, had worked with Arthur decades ago, back when Sterling Holdings was just a fledgling dream in a young man's eye. Rico, seeing my relentless work ethic, my insatiable curiosity, and my uncanny knack for structural analysis, took me under his wing. Over late-night coffee breaks, huddled against the biting New England wind, he'd share stories about Arthur's early days, how he'd started with nothing but a beat-up Ford pickup and a fierce determination. But then, Rico would pause, his eyes distant, a knowing, almost sorrowful look on his weathered face. "Your mother, Eleanor," he'd say, his voice softer, laced with a genuine reverence. "She was the real brains behind half his early deals, kid. Not many knew it. Arthur liked to keep her work quiet, you know? Said it was unseemly for a woman of her standing to be haggling over land prices. But she spoke 5 languages, could spot a good property from a mile away. Arthur always said she was his secret weapon. She managed the books, talked to all the Spanish-speaking laborers, even drafted some of the early contracts. Without Eleanor, there wouldn't be a Sterling Holdings. That revelation was a thunderclap, a seismic shift in my understanding of my family's history. It ignited a spark of suspicion that quickly consumed me, transforming the dull ache of being an outsider into a burning conviction that I had been systematically, deliberately wronged. My mother wasn't just Arthur's wife. She was his business partner, his intellectual equal, the true strategic genius behind the explosive early growth of his empire. And if that was true, if Eleanor was truly the unsung hero, then the sheer scale of Cassandra's calculated erasure, the deliberate freezing and apparent theft of my trust fund, took on a far more sinister and terrifying meaning. My blood ran cold as I understood the implications. They weren't just neglecting me. They were systematically stealing from me, from Eleanor's legacy, from the very foundations she had painstakingly laid. Driven by a hunger for truth that became an obsession, I began my clandestine investigation. Every spare moment, every ounce of my meager earnings was poured into this solitary pursuit. I haunted the dusty, forgotten archives of county records offices, poring over brittle, yellowed property deeds, faded blueprints of long demolished structures, and microfilmed corporate filings from decades past. I spent countless hours in the quiet corners of the community college library, devouring every legal textbook on property law, inheritance, and elder abuse I could get my hands on. I learned to read between the lines of convoluted financial statements, to spot the subtle discrepancies in land transfer documents, to trace the digital breadcrumbs of illicit transactions. It was a slow, painstaking process, like excavating a buried city, each discovery a painful shard of truth. What I unearthed was far more shocking, far more damning than I could have ever imagined. Many of the sprawling properties Arthur now claimed to have developed from scratch, the very jewels in Sterling Holdings' crown, were, in fact, inherited directly from Eleanor's side of the family. Her immigrant grandparents, with incredible foresight, had purchased vast, seemingly worthless tracts of land in the 1930s and 40s, long before anyone realized their true value. Eleanor's maiden name, Eleanor Vance, appeared on dozens of original deeds, undeniable proof of her family's foundational ownership. But somehow, in the murky aftermath of her death, every single one of those properties had been mysteriously transferred solely into Arthur's name, stripping Eleanor of any claim, any acknowledgement. This wasn't mere oversight. It was a deliberate, legalistic sleight of hand, a corporate vanishing act designed to consolidate all control and credit into Arthur's hands, diminishing Eleanor's monumental contribution to nothing more than a footnote. The true depths of Cassandra's avarice and Marcus Thorne's complicity became terrifyingly clear as I delved deeper into the financial records. I uncovered patterns of recent property transfers that didn't match Arthur's authenticated signature. Cassandra, with Marcus Thorne's direct assistance, had been systematically forging Arthur's signature on a cascade of financial documents, quietly moving vast sums of money and valuable assets, prime land holdings in coveted coastal towns, exclusive development rights for lucrative urban projects, even intellectual property and patents related to Eleanor's early innovations in green building practices into shell corporations and offshore accounts secretly controlled by her and her children. My trust fund hadn't just been frozen. It had been illegally accessed, pilfered, and redistributed amongst themselves. Eleanor's original, meticulously prepared will, I discovered, had left specific and generous provisions for my education, my future, and a substantial endowment for community projects she championed. These too had been meticulously hidden, rendered invisible by Cassandra's machinations. They were not just stealing from Eleanor's past. They were actively siphoning off Arthur's present, systematically gutting Sterling Holdings from the inside out, preparing to leave him with little more than a hollowed-out shell when he inevitably passed. The family dynamic, already strained, grew venomous as my investigation deepened. Serafina, now a sharp, self-serving corporate lawyer, treated me with thinly veiled contempt, viewing me as an inconvenient relic whenever she deigned to visit Sterling Manor. Brandon, despite his utter lack of business acumen, had been installed in a senior management position at Sterling Holdings, acting as Cassandra's eager lapdog, more interested in flashy cars and extravagant vacations than actual work. Both siblings clearly saw me as an obstacle to their inevitable inheritance, a pretender to a throne they believed was rightfully and solely theirs. Cassandra's hostility intensified with each passing month. She became overtly aggressive, scheduling family dinners when she knew I was working my exhausting construction shifts, organizing luxurious, exclusive family vacations without bothering to extend an invitation, and making pointed, cutting comments about ungrateful children who don't appreciate what they have, or outsiders who cling to past glories. Arthur, now frail, his memory increasingly unreliable, seemed oblivious to the seething tension, lost in the gilded cage Cassandra had carefully constructed around him. He became increasingly dependent on her, a puppet on her strings. The constant surveillance, the meticulous sifting through mountains of data, the clandestine meetings with former Sterling employees who held fragments of the truth consumed my entire life. I was a ghost in my own home, living a perilous double life, maintaining a facade of quiet resignation while meticulously building a case that would not only shatter their world, but redefine the very meaning of legacy in the Sterling family. I couldn't afford a lawyer, so I became my own, devouring legal precedent, learning about elder abuse, complex financial fraud, and the intricate dance of inheritance law. By the time Arthur turned 70, I had assembled a comprehensive, undeniable file, irrefutable proof that Eleanor's family land was the very bedrock of Sterling's empire, and that Cassandra and Marcus had been systematically stealing from Arthur through forged documents and illicit transfers for years. But I needed the perfect moment, the perfect stage, to reveal everything. Cassandra would destroy the evidence if she suspected anything, and Arthur's increasingly precarious health meant time was running short. I had to hit them where it hurt most, their public image, their perceived legitimacy. The opportunity, ripe with dramatic potential, arrived with Arthur's 70th birthday party. Cassandra, ever the orchestrator of grand illusions, had spared no expense, planning an elaborate, ostentatious celebration at the prestigious Greenwich Country Club. It was to be a spectacle of wealth and influence, a who's who of business associates, long-standing family friends, and local politicians, all eager to rub shoulders with the Sterling elite. It was meant to solidify Arthur's monumental legacy, crown Cassandra as the undisputed matriarch of the Sterling dynasty, and showcase Serafina and Brandon as the rightful, unchallenged heirs. It was to be their moment of ultimate triumph, their public coronation. But I knew it would be their spectacular, humiliating downfall. I spent my last paycheck, every hard-earned dollar from my construction work, on a seemingly sentimental gift, a custom-designed, beautifully framed, antique-style reproduction of the original property deed for the sprawling tract of land where Arthur had built his very first iconic development, a place now known as Sterling Commons, one of the most valuable properties in their portfolio. To anyone else, it would look like a thoughtful tribute, honoring his father's supposed self-made legacy. But I had made one crucial, meticulously executed modification. Using advanced digital forensic techniques I'd learned from online courses and countless hours of practice, I had restored Eleanor's maiden name, Eleanor Vance, to its rightful place on the deed, emblazoned an elegant, undeniable script beside Arthur's name. It was subtle, yet devastatingly clear. It was the key to unlocking the truth, a silent scream of betrayal from beyond the grave, an undeniable testament to the woman they had systematically erased. I also prepared a secure digital file, accessible only by a timed release, containing all the damning evidence, the financial forensics, the forged signatures, the wire transfer records, Marcus Thorne's own shady dealings with shell companies, and the full, undeniable truth about my frozen trust fund. This would be my insurance, my fail-safe, should they try to silence me after the initial shock. The day of the party dawned, crisp and clear, a deceptive calm before the storm. The Greenwich Country Club ballroom glittered, adorned with crystal chandeliers that refracted sunlight into 1,000 sparkling diamonds, and overflowing floral arrangements that exuded an almost oppressive luxury. Guests, a constellation of power and privilege, mingled amidst the rhythmic clinking of champagne flutes and hushed conversations about market trends, political influence, and the latest Sterling Holdings triumph. Arthur, frail but beaming, sat at the head table, looking every inch the benevolent patriarch in a custom-tailored suit. Cassandra, radiant and poised, stood beside him, a vision of triumphant elegance, her eyes constantly scanning the room, surveying her dominion with an almost regal air. Serafina, sharp and self-assured in a designer gown, and Brandon, charming but utterly vacuous in his tailored tuxedo, flanked their stepfather, carefully positioned as the undeniable heirs apparent, basking in the reflected glory. I stood near the back, a quiet observer, my heart a relentless hammer against my ribs, the weight of the framed deed in my hands, a tangible, pulsing presence. The air was thick with unspoken anticipation, a delicious tension that only I fully perceived. Speakers took turns at the podium, a parade of sycophants and old friends, each lavishing praise upon Arthur's visionary leadership and the unparalleled success of the Sterling family empire. Cassandra beamed, her smile fixed and triumphant, her eyes occasionally flicking towards me, a flicker of disdain in their depths. Serafina and Brandon offered their polished, rehearsed speeches, each word a testament to their own perceived brilliance, carefully omitting any mention of my existence, as if I were merely a phantom, a figment of their father's past. Finally, as the gifts were being presented, a parade of expensive watches, rare wines, and glittering jewelry, Arthur's eyes found me, standing almost invisible in the periphery. A glint of patronizing amusement flickered in his gaze. "Kevin, son," Arthur's voice boomed across the hushed room, carrying a hint of feigned jocularity that stung, a public reminder of my perceived inadequacy, my othernesses in their world. "Don't tell me you forgot to bring your old man a gift." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread through the guests, many of whom undoubtedly knew the strained dynamic within the Sterling family. It was a thinly veiled jab, a public humiliation. My moment had arrived. I walked forward, every eye in the room following me, the air thick with unspoken anticipation. My pace was slow, deliberate, each step a testament to the years of quiet suffering, the countless sleepless nights spent meticulously unearthing the truth that would now explode into the light. I approached the head table, the framed deed held reverently in my hands, a silent promise of the chaos about to erupt. "I didn't forget, Dad," I said, my voice quiet but firm, resonating with the chilling calm that cut through the polite murmurs. My gaze met Cassandra's, a challenge flickering in my eyes. Her smile wavered, a micro-expression of unease flashing across her face. I placed the beautifully wrapped frame on the table directly in front of Arthur, a single, unassuming sheet of paper hidden beneath layers of elaborate gift wrap. Just a single sheet of paper, nothing fancy. Arthur, intrigued by my unusual offering, unwrapped the frame with a bemused smile, still playing to the crowd. His fingers, gnarled with age, fumbled with the ribbon, the paper tearing away to reveal the antique-style deed. He lifted it, his eyes scanning the faded script. The smile on his face slowly, sickeningly, dissolved. The color drained from his face, leaving it ashen, cadaverous. His eyes, clouded by age and a lifetime of carefully constructed delusion, snapped into sharp, terrifying focus. He recognized the property, the exact coordinates, the familiar signature of his own youth. But then his gaze snagged on the meticulously restored name, emblazoned beside his own, glaring up at him from the parchment like a vengeful ghost. Eleanor Vance. The room, moments before a symphony of polite chatter, fell into a suffocating, almost unnatural silence. You could hear a pin drop. Arthur's hands began to tremble violently, the framed deed shaking in his grasp, threatening to fall. He looked up, his eyes wide with a desperate, animalistic confusion. Then at Cassandra, a flicker of raw, dawning suspicion sparking in their depths. Cassandra, seeing the deed, let out a tiny, choked gasp, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes darting frantically from the deed to me, then to the shocked faces of the guests. Serafina's jaw clenched, her composure cracking, while Brandon simply stared, slack-jawed and clueless. Then Arthur's voice, once booming and authoritative, cracked with a blend of profound embarrassment, confusion, and raw, unadulterated anger. He pointed a trembling finger at me, his face contorting into a mask of rage. "You're not my biological son, so I forgot to put your name in the will." He blurted out, a desperate, irrational lie born of pure, animalistic panic, his voice echoing through the stunned silence. It was a humiliating public admission that confirmed what I had always felt. I was indeed his fake son. The room erupted, not in applause but in a wave of uncomfortable, bewildered murmurs from guests who at first thought it was an awkward joke, a clumsy attempt at dark humor. Many looked at me with pity, then back at Arthur with a mixture of shock and disdain. But I didn't laugh. I didn't flinch. My gaze remained fixed on Arthur, a look of profound sorrow mixed with unyielding resolve. Then I swept my eyes over Cassandra's porcelain white face, then Serafina's horrified, calculating expression, and Brandon's slack-jawed, confused shock. My moment of true defiance was about to begin. I walked up calmly, reached out, and with slow, deliberate movements, took the framed deed from my father's trembling hands. The room held its breath. Then I slowly, deliberately tore it into pieces. 1, rip. 2, 3. The sound, amplified in the sudden, horrified silence, was like a series of gunshots. The parchment, once a symbol of their theft, now shredded into meaningless fragments. The laughter died instantly. Arthur's hands shook uncontrollably as he tried, futilely, to piece the fragments back together on the table, his face growing paler, his breath coming in ragged gasps with each fragment he recognized. He knew. He finally, irrevocably understood what he was looking at, irrefutable proof that Eleanor, my mother, had been the true foundational owner of the properties that formed the very bedrock of his empire. The weight of decades of deceit, of her deliberate erasure, of the very foundation of his wealth being a stolen legacy, crashed down on him. "Where did you get this?" Arthur whispered, his voice a ragged gasp, barely audible, his eyes wide with a terror I had never seen in my life. He looked not at me, but beyond me, at Cassandra, a dawning horror in his eyes. I leaned close, my voice low, for his ears only, the ultimate sting of truth delivered with chilling precision. "From Mom's safety deposit box, Dad. The one Cassandra told you was empty. The one filled with every original deed, every true contract, every provision she made for me." As I spoke, I subtly activated the timed release on the secure digital file I had prepared. Copies of every damning document, every financial discrepancy, every forged signature, every wire transfer, along with an explanatory summary, were simultaneously blasted to the personal emails of every Sterling Holdings board member, every major investor, and every prominent media contact present in the room. I had built my case not just for my father, but for the world. The birthday party dissolved into utter chaos. Arthur, overwhelmed by the revelation and the crushing weight of his own complicity, clutching his chest, gasped for air. A collective gasp swept through the ballroom as medical professionals rushed forward, pushing through the bewildered guests. Though doctors later determined it was severe anxiety and shock rather than a heart attack, the damage was done. Cassandra, her carefully constructed facade shattered, immediately went into damage control mode, her voice shrill with desperation, trying to spin a frantic narrative of a vengeful, mentally unstable son upsetting his frail father with fake documents. She shrieked, pointing at me, demanding that country club security escort me from the premises, her eyes blazing with a hatred that was both primal and terrifying, like a cornered animal. But the seed of truth had been planted, irrevocably. Several of Arthur's longtime business associates, men who had witnessed the early days of Sterling Holdings, men who had heard whispers about Eleanor Vance's true brilliance and her forgotten contributions, recognized the profound significance of what they'd witnessed. The subtle nuances of old property deeds, the quiet truths they'd suppressed for decades, it all clicked into place. Whispers turned to urgent phone calls. Word spread like wildfire through the elite real estate community. There were serious, potentially criminal problems with the Sterling family's property claims, problems that went to the very foundation of Arthur Sterling's empire. Within days, I found myself in the middle of a brutal, no-holds-barred war. Cassandra, in a fit of desperate, unhinged rage, immediately ordered Serafina's law firm to file a massive lawsuit against me, claiming defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress with a staggering demand for punitive damages. Brandon, ever Cassandra's feckless puppet, spread malicious rumors throughout his social circles that I was mentally unstable, dangerous, and a disinherited black sheep seeking to ruin a respected family name. Marcus Thorne, swift and ruthless, leveraging his position, froze every single account I might have access to, claiming security concerns related to the ongoing investigation, effectively leaving me financially stranded, without a home, without a job. The counterattack was swift and brutal, a coordinated strike designed to crush me into submission. I lost my construction job when Cassandra's vast network of connections pressured my employer. My small, humble apartment lease was mysteriously terminated with no explanation. Even my community college enrollment was threatened when someone anonymously reported that my financial aid applications contained fraudulent information. For a brief, terrifying moment, as I huddled on Rico's couch, jobless and seemingly alone, facing the full, terrifying wrath of a powerful, vindictive family, I wondered if I'd made a terrible, irreversible mistake. But they had underestimated me. They had underestimated the strength forged in years of being an outsider, the relentless resilience honed by adversity. They had underestimated the unyielding power of truth. The very chaos they unleashed became my greatest ally. The media, scenting blood in the water, descended like a pack of hungry wolves, their cameras flashing, their microphones thrust forward. eager for the next scandalous headline. The story of Arthur Sterling's dramatic collapse, the fake son accusation, and my public defiant act became a national sensation. I, the quiet, overlooked son, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight, not as a victim, but as a whistleblower, a symbol of righteous defiance against corporate greed and familial betrayal. I reached out to the few loyal individuals I trusted and those who saw through the Sterling charade. Rico, my old foreman, immediately offered me a place to stay indefinitely, his gruff exterior softening with a quiet, paternal admiration. "You did good, kid," he'd said, a rare compliment that resonated deeply. "Eleanor would be damn proud." My former professors at the community college, seeing through the smears, publicly vouched for my integrity, my academic standing, and my unblemished work ethic. And crucially, a network of powerful legal aid foundations, drawn by the sensational nature of the case and the clear evidence of elder abuse, financial fraud, and a stolen inheritance, offered their pro bono services. This wasn't just about my inheritance anymore. It was about exposing a systemic pattern of financial manipulation and holding the powerful accountable, a fight for justice that resonated with thousands across the country. The ensuing legal battle was a whirlwind of depositions, discovery, and sensational headlines that captivated the nation. The meticulously gathered evidence from my quiet investigation, the forged signatures, the hidden trust documents, the illicit transfers, the detailed financial forensics, Marcus Thorne's own shady dealings with shell companies proved irrefutable. Marcus, under intense scrutiny and facing decades in prison, crumbled, confessing to his instrumental role in the scheme in exchange for a lighter sentence. His chilling testimony, combined with the comprehensive forensic audits I had enabled, painted a damning, undeniable picture of Cassandra's long-standing avarice and manipulation. Serafina's prestigious law firm, its reputation now tarnished, quickly distanced itself from the case, citing ethical conflicts, leaving Cassandra isolated, exposed, and utterly alone to face the consequences of her actions. Brandon, lacking any true backbone, vanished from the public eye, his privileged world in ruins. Arthur, slowly recovering from his emotional and physical collapse, was forced to confront the brutal, unvarnished truth of his life. The evidence was undeniable. The betrayal by his wife and her brother, a stark, brutal reality that shattered his carefully constructed illusions. He was a broken man, stripped of his grand delusions, his empire now under relentless forensic examination, its very foundations exposed as rotten. He eventually entered a quiet, dignified retirement, his vast wealth greatly diminished by restitution and legal fees, his once unblemished legacy forever tainted, but perhaps, finally, free from Cassandra's insidious influence. In his final days, he sought me out, not to apologize, but to simply look at me with a quiet, profound regret. I didn't offer forgiveness, but I offered understanding. Cassandra Sterling and Marcus Thorne faced the full, merciless force of the law. Convicted of multiple counts of corporate fraud, elder abuse, embezzlement, and conspiracy, they received lengthy prison sentences, their names forever synonymous with avarice and betrayal. Their lavish lives, built on deceit and stolen legacies, came crashing down around them, leaving them with nothing but the cold, hard reality of justice served. My life, however, was fundamentally transformed. The legal battle had drained me, physically and emotionally, leaving deep scars, but it had also forged me into something stronger, more resilient, and utterly unapologetic about pursuing truth. I didn't just reclaim Eleanor's inheritance, I reclaimed my own identity, my own narrative, my own worth. The millions recovered from Eleanor's trust fund, combined with the residual assets from Sterling Holdings that were rightfully mine, became the bedrock of my new venture, Vance Legacy Designs. It wasn't just an architectural or construction company. It was a mission, a testament to Eleanor's vision and my unwavering commitment to integrity. We specialized in ethical property acquisition, in rectifying complex ownership disputes for individuals who had been wronged, and in developing sustainable, community-focused projects built on transparency and genuine partnership. I hired a team of brilliant, ethically minded architects, engineers, and legal experts, many of whom had been drawn to my story, inspired by my fight. Our motto became, building on truth, designing for legacy. We didn't just construct buildings, we built trust, restored legacies, and ensured that every brick was laid on a foundation of honesty. Our contracts a beacon of clarity in a notoriously opaque industry. We focused on affordable housing, on urban revitalization projects that genuinely benefited communities, and on preserving historical properties whose true stories had been forgotten. My personal life began to rebuild too, though the journey was slow and deliberate. The pain of my separation from Arthur and the profound familial betrayal that led to it had left deep, lingering scars. But I found a new purpose, a new way to connect with the world, a new definition of family. I met Clara, a compassionate and insightful lawyer who had worked on my pro bono legal team during the darkest days of my battle. She understood the complexities of my past, the lingering shadows of betrayal, and she saw the strength, integrity, and deep sense of justice that lay beneath them. We built a life together, not on stolen wealth or inherited status, but on shared values, mutual respect, and an unwavering commitment to truth. Our home was not a sprawling manor, but a comfortable, sunlit house with a thriving garden, a place where honesty blossomed, where laughter echoed, and where memories of Eleanor were celebrated, cherished, and forever vibrant. I never sought vengeance for its own sake. My drive was for justice, for truth, for the reclamation of what was rightfully mine and, infinitely more importantly, what was rightfully Eleanor's, a legacy of quiet brilliance that had been callously suppressed. Arthur's final years were quiet, marked by a profound melancholy, a man wrestling with the bitter taste of his own complicity in Eleanor's erasure. He occasionally reached out, seeking reconciliation, but the chasm between us, born of years of neglect and final, undeniable betrayal, remained. I had found a kind of peace, not in forgiveness of their actions, but in self-respect, in the unwavering knowledge that I had fought for what was right and had built something truly good, truly lasting, from the ashes of betrayal. The story that began with a father's dismissive, hurtful words and a son's public act of defiance became something much larger than just revenge. It became a powerful testament to the unyielding power of truth, the incredible resilience of the human spirit, and the fundamental principle that some legacies are not passed down through blood, but forged in fire, defended with vigilance, and built brick by painstaking brick on the unshakable foundation of integrity. And sometimes, the most important place you go is not to inherit an empire that was never truly yours, but to meticulously, passionately, and ethically build your own one that truly reflects who you are, what you stand for, and the undeniable truth that can never truly be buried.